What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com for another edition of the UNC Basketball Show. I'm Jacob Turner. He's THI publisher Andrew Jones. And AJ, exciting show ahead. A lot of different things to talk about. I'm excited to talk about some of the senior night festivities and some of your thoughts and takeaways from what was a pretty all-around good night for North Carolina basketball on Tuesday evening against Notre. We're going to talk about some other things as well before we look ahead a little bit to the Duke game later on in the show. Obviously, a tasty matchup coming up ahead on Saturday in Durham. It's tasty, AJ. Yeah, it's for different reasons.
I used a buffet example with Chelsea last night in the Three Things video and she said she thought it was great, and I said, "Where did it come from?" I said, "I'm starving. I had a low carb pita yesterday, and that was it. And now you're talking about tasty, so I'm gonna have to run into the kitchen here in a minute."
Yeah, you got that food on your mind, man. I mean, if anytime you'll get hungry, it's after a game or at a game. I'm always starving at games for some reason.
Starving.
I have no idea why, but anytime at a game, it happens every single time.
Well, you got a lot of inner buzz going.
Yeah, adrenaline pumping a little bit. Trying to do
tasty. Tasty's a pretty appropriate word to describe Duke Carolina, especially this one, because so much is on the line.
A lot on the line. And like I said, we will talk about that a little bit later on in the show. This show is sponsored by My Perfect Franchise and RogueShop.com. We're going to talk about them a little bit later on in the show, but big thank you to those guys. Long time, I should say, sponsors of TarHeelIllustrated.com. So big thank you for them continuing to rock with us. But AJ, let's talk a little Tuesday night. Carolina, obviously big win over Notre Dame on senior night. 7 seniors honored for the Tar Heels. In let's start with I want to start with just you being there in the vibe in the building, because senior night's always emotional. 7 guys is a good amount, but I think even more than that, the Armando Bacot factor. Maybe we start with him specifically. Really emotional in his post-game interview, just super raw with his emotion in it. We've talked about how good of an interview he is, how cool it's been to see him transform from a young kid who came into the program to, 5 years later, he's a grown man at this point. But it's been really cool to kind of see that journey that he's undergone, not only as a basketball player, AJ, but I'm more so talking about as a person and as an individual, which I think is even more interesting. So we'll talk a little bit more about senior night and everything else in a second, but I haven't talked to you about this yet. So I'm more interested. So I'm doing this from a selfish perspective a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about Armando's emotion and just the vibe of being in that building with all that stuff going on.
So, where we do the player interviews after the games, it's right off the tunnel where the Tar Heels went out into the court. And when I finished and heading back to the press room for Hubert's presser, Armando's dad stopped me and had a nice exchange and talked a lot about his 5 years. And it wasn't about basketball. It was about Armando. It was about a young man growing up. And the thing that I always go back to, and I referenced this in the column I wrote last night, and by the way, I wasn't going to write a column about Armando last night. I usually have my mind made up when I go into the interviews. Sometimes it changes because I've always said that the teams that we cover, they dictate what we write and say based on how they perform and then what they say about it. And last night was one of those examples. So we go in there and Armando is just pouring out emotion. Kevin Roy got 10 minutes of him when he was really emotional. I was talking to some other players, so I got 5 more minutes. We got about 16 minutes of Armando on 2 videos. People should watch both. And I had a good exchange with him, kind of joking with him that I probably asked him more questions than any Carolina player I've ever covered because he's been around. Because he's been around since the turn of the century. But the conversation with Armando's dad was about how he grew up. And I mentioned the voices in his head when he talked about this as a freshman. It was early January 2020. Nobody had heard of COVID yet, but we were about to. And Armando really struggled in December coming off the injury against Ohio State. And he said that he was hearing voices in his head that were negative voices, and he had to fight through that. And his dad knew exactly what I'm talking about. And then, of course, the conversation Armando had with Roy the summer after his freshman year. And I thought what was really telling, and everybody should watch this. I can't do it justice telling you. I'll try, but I can't. Roy, he had Daron Sharp and Walker Kessler coming in. And Armando said, look, most kids would have left. And he started tearing up. and he had to use his jersey to wipe his eyes, and he stuck through it, and Roy pushed him. And he said he appreciated Roy's honesty, which again goes back to coddling never works. It really doesn't work. If it does, you're lucky. But pushing people and understanding how to push people, and a guy like Armando had to be pushed because maybe at that stage in his life, he wasn't going to naturally pull himself out, and Roy pushed him. And it's the best thing that ever happened to him on so many levels, because he is there now because of the push he got from Roy back then. But he was open to the push, I think, because innately because of who he is and how he was raised, because the voices in the head comments, most kids aren't going to reveal that, but Armando arrived in Chapel Hill, a young man willing to get better, willing to expose himself for the good of himself. And he's done that in 4.5, almost 5 years. And he continues to do that. He did it last night with the emotion. We haven't seen that. He said that he didn't think he was going to do that, but he sat down and looked at the media around him. He's like, I love talking to you guys. I'm going to miss this. And you don't get that very often from athletes. Most of them hate us because they have a preconceived notion by outsiders who know nothing that we're all out to get them, which is completely false. None in the media that covers North Carolina, I can assure you that. None. But it was a very genuine evening after the game with him. And I appreciate that. And I like that. I like Armando. I've made no bones about it. I like him a lot. I've enjoyed watching him grow up and mature. He's going to go on and do very successful things. And whatever it is he eventually does for the majority of the rest of his life, I think he has a chance to play in the NBA. And because of the player he's been this year is why I think that. Much to the disagreement of a lot of people who strictly look at 3 or 4 boxes in the stat line. There are a lot of other reasons why he can, but he should be celebrated. We did a podcast about him a couple days ago, Daily Drop. He should be celebrated for 1,000 reasons, but I have never covered a player who loved his school and expressed love for his school more regularly and over the course of time than Armando Bacot. He understands. I told you, remember a couple of years ago, I had that one-on-one. It was during the second COVID year, like the full COVID year. Yeah. We still couldn't get one-on-one interviews yet in person. So I got, one day I got a Hubert on the phone one-on-one for the specific purpose of talking about Armando. Then I got Armando. And we talked a lot about his place in history then. That was 2 years ago. And he keenly aware of all the guys that are up there in the rafters. But he went a step further yesterday when he started talking about Mia Hamm and Lawrence Taylor and people like that. And here's a guy who knows. He knows all the connect. I guarantee he knows that Andy Griffith went to UNC. You know what I mean?
I'm sure he does, yeah.
He gets it. He gets the landscape. It is totally infused in his blood. He even made a joke about his brother. His little brother, Armando, says a top-ranked 7th grader in the country.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, King. Really good player.
Well, and Armando's like, he's going to come here. He ain't going anywhere else. He's coming here. So it is basketball shaped Armando. Basketball gave him a platform, and he took advantage of it. He is I even said to his father, I said, Armando's been really good for UNC, but UNC's been really good for Armando. I said that has been an excellent exchange with each other. And Armando has gotten everything he can get out of the experience with a little bit more to go on the court. And I think UNC has gotten plenty out of Armando Bacot. So I don't want to go mushy stuff. I don't want people to think I'm getting mushy here. I'm not. But, man, I got unbelievable respect for that dude. Unbelievable respect for him.
Yeah, same here. And I think just to stay on him again for a second, you talked about the quote, and this was the biggest thing that stood out to me, is you talked about 2 things that stood out to me. And I tweeted this out. It was, like you said, love for the university and his understanding of what it means to be a student athlete at the highest level, like he is for Carolina basketball, the face of that program in a lot of ways, and what that means to represent something like that. To me, I think a lot of Carolina players understand it, but like you said, nobody really expressed it like he did. Nobody really expresses it like he has. And I think that's what sets him apart. And again, even going back to the media quote where he was like, got emotional talking about the media and like, but that made me think, AJ, because it made me think of someone like you who goes to all the away games. You're everywhere. I mean, you've been I know there's a couple games that you've missed out of Armando's career because of football stuff and things like that, but you were at 95% of Armando's games. And
99 probably.
99.5 probably was you missed less than 5 more than likely because of, like I said, because of football commitments and they're in the Bahamas or whatever. But when you go in these road locker rooms, I mean, first thing he sees after a game is 2 or 3 of you guys. And that's an everyday occurrence, an every game occurrence. And you get used to talking to that. But I don't think anybody expressed an appreciation for those little things that people don't necessarily think about. I've never seen a player do it like Armando has. So got to give credit to him, like I said, as a basketball player and to see that development that he has, AJ. But as I've always harped on with Armando, even more impressive for me has been his transformation as a guy, as a human being, as a person. It's been really, really cool to watch and follow because, like I said this a few times, but Armando, that Armando's freshman year was kind of my first full year, or maybe it was my second full year of covering a Carolina basketball program. So for him to see where he's at now and where he ended up and where, whatever he's going to do next, it's just a really cool thing to see. So I just wanted to state that one more time.
And let's include the sense of humor.
Of course.
The recognition for the need of that moment of levity is all about Armando. Last night, when he mentioned something about media, and I don't even know how it came up. I'd have to go back and listen to it again. But I said to him, I said, I think I've covered almost all of your games. I have covered almost all your games. I said, I think I probably asked you more questions than any Carolina athlete I've ever covered. And he kind of laughed a little bit. And I said, now that's probably good for me, but maybe not so great for you. And he said, yeah. He was playing right along with it. And that's him. Quick-witted, unbelievably smart dude. Mm-hmm. He's got peripheral vision in life. Mm-hmm. And that's important because a lot of times kids at that age don't have it. He has it. So Carolina fans, I thought they gave him a nice ovation. I know that the people were complaining on Twitter because he missed a dunk. Well, it's only fitting that in the world of Armando Bacot, which is unlike most people's, he misses a dunk and hits 2 3-pointers.
I know.
So I asked RJ, I said, wasn't that like the most Armando thing? And RJ cracked up and said, yeah, that's totally Armando. On his the last basket he ever made in the Smith Center was a freaking 3-pointer.
I know, isn't it? It's just like it was written.
And it was a 3-pointer that he called.
I know.
He told RJ, basically called the play. RJ, if you go right, it's going to open up some space over here. I'm going to pop out and shoot it again. And he had 2 of them, AJ. 2 threes last night. Just crazy, man. Just crazy. Same spot, both in the second half.
I know. It's just and that's a perfect segue because I want to talk about the game as a whole just a little bit more real quick because I tweeted out after the game that it just felt like an all-around good night for Carolina basketball. You had Armando Bacot hitting threes, Jalen Withers hitting Jalen Washington hitting threes, Seth Trimble. He had a play in the first half where he backs down his man and hits this fadeaway Kobe shot that I've never seen him do. Jalen Withers hitting a reverse and one under the basket. RJ being RJ like we've seen. Sticking his tongue out at the crowd after hitting threes. As someone who was in the building, what was the buzz like in there? Because not only during the game because of how well everything was going, it was a blowout and everything like that, but from watching the Armando and, RJ check out kind of for the last time and some of the other seniors as well, it seemed like that place was just super, super loud. And the buzz and vibe into the Smith Center last night was it just seemed incredible for somebody who was watching it on TV. So talk to me a little bit more about the atmosphere in there and kind of what it was like, as somebody who was, sitting in the upper deck and on press row.
Have you seen the movie Saturday Night Fever?
Yes, but it's been a while.
Okay.
I was younger.
Are you familiar with, it's sort of a dance-off type thing.
Yeah, right? yeah. I know
and there's been other movies, and I'm sure most people can identify with this. Imagine you're at a nightclub, and there's like a dance-off, and there's the people surrounding the dance area, and every once in a while, a different couple goes on in the center area, the dance area, and they perform, they do their thing. Last night's game was kind of like that, where each player had their little center stage sequence where everyone else was around them and they were in the middle of the dance floor and they were dancing and they were showing off their moves and they were wowing everybody and people are going, woo, they're dancing and they're getting it up, they're clapping, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of what it was like. And the fans were sitting back appreciating, okay, here's the sample of Jalen Withers. Here's the sample of Seth. Here's a sample of Jay Wash. And all along, Elliott just kind of quietly facilitating, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the RJ. RJ scored in every conceivable way last night, except dunking, and I'm not sure he can dunk. And although it looked like, I think one time like he was thinking about it, Cormac added that aggressiveness to his game last night, driving into the lane a lot more. I think they're a little bit popping because it was Dame. And also, I just think that this team is feeling the time of year. So they had everything on display. Everyone kind of had their minute. Even the walk-ons that started, Dewey Ferris had a rebound. And he should have drawn a charge. He should have gotten the charge. So Dewey Ferris was at the center of the dance floor as well. So other than the end of the game when the walk-ons came back on and didn't play very well, but they were all amped up and having fun, no big deal, no harm. That's kind of what it was like. And everybody in the crowd were the onlookers who would never dare to dance because they're embarrassed to dance in front of people, but they're enjoying it. And they're sitting back and they're having their beverage and they're clapping along with watching other people do their thing. That's what it was like.
Mm-hmm. It was amazing.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. Everything that this team can do well was on display some way last night.
Yeah, RJ getting one more year chance as well. I mean, I know a lot of Carolina fans are hoping that will happen. I saw our good friend Brett Friedlander, we talk about here a lot, wrote a kind of a column about that last night of a lot of chance for that. And it's when you think about it, AJ, we talked about it on the drop we did about Armando. Funny enough, when you think about NIL and everything, it's not inconceivable that he does come back for a fifth year. Things, a lot of it depends on what happens the remainder of the year. Like I said, I keep saying if Carolina goes and win a national championship, that's when you tend to see a lot of people leave after that because it's like I've kind of come here to do what I've done. Now let's move on to the next thing. But again, not inconceivable that RJ comes back. I don't know what's ultimately going to happen, but I thought that was a pretty cool moment with the Carolina fans showing him a lot of love too, and rightly so.
Well, he was asked about that, and he had some fun with it and stuff. And then I said, "Was Deja at the game?" He said, no, they've already gone to Greensboro for the women's ACC tournament. I said, if she was in the stands, would she have been chanting one more year? He started laughing. He goes, yeah, she would have. I said, well, you both are in the same shoes, same situation, because she can use her COVID year as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, I got a sense that there's a good chance it happens, but you're right. What transpires the next month could change that one way or the other, but he'll probably make more money in Carolina than he would in a two-way contract for sure. Mm-hmm. Certainly playing overseas. Maybe she might make more too. And I would imagine she could play in the WNBA. She's a pretty good player. So, but I do think that that's a realistic possibility. So if I was a Carolina fan, I would go into the remainder of the season where every game is basically do or die from this point on. Not worried about whether or not he comes back, but knowing that there's a solid chance that it could happen.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm glad you brought up the Deja Kelly angle. So I was having a conversation with a Carolina fan about that yesterday, funny enough, of someone was asking me about RJ, and I'm like, don't think that might not play a factor too. I mean, it's because they both are, like you said, they're both kind of in the same position, and they both returning to Chapel Hill might be the best thing, not only for their career, but for their, bank account and financial situation as well. So
if you have that kind of relationship and you're pretty mature and he's pretty mature, they might have ideas of what they want in life. So that might be a part of the equation too.
Yeah. Again, interesting to see what kind of transpires with that. But again, one more year, I don't think is something that's inconceivable by any means. But AJ, before we move on a little bit, I want to give a shout out to our first sponsor in the show. That's My Perfect Franchise. .net, guys, look, if you're looking to diversify, you take control of your own career. Andy Ludicky, the founder and owner of My Perfect Franchise, is the guy that can help you do it. He's a longtime Rivals member, diehard college football fan, and most importantly for this situation right here and what he does, a franchise veteran, having owned multiple franchises and businesses throughout his career. So here's what he does. Using his expertise, he helps you open a franchise. He walks you through every step of the way, and we've talked about it so many times. There's so many different types of franchises. Anywhere you look, anywhere you drive around, fast food, car chains, heck, we talk about it all the time. Andy has a dumpster franchise that he does. Everything that you see can be franchised and is often a franchise that you just don't happen to know about. And what he does is he helps you find the American dream through opening your own franchise, walks you through every step of the process. And AJ is my favorite part about it. He doesn't make a single penny unless you do. So that thing, it's just absolutely awesome for me. He makes it so easy to open a franchise, and he's there every step of the way with you, which I think it just adds to that comfort level when you're taking a different step and, getting out of your comfort zone a little bit with starting a new career and trying to, control your own income and wealth. So really awesome opportunity here. Just talk to Andy, myprivatefranchise.net, 100% free. What do you really have to lose? Go on over to the website, links in the description below, get in contact with Andy, put your life and career in your own hands. Even if you're just thinking about it, it's definitely worth having a conversation with Andy to see if it's something that's right for you. So big thank you to myprivatefranchise.net, links in the description below. And a big thank you to Andy for continuing to sponsor TarHeelIllustrated.com and the UNC basketball show and a lot of other pods we do as well. All right, AJ, let's talk about Carolina as a whole right now. Obviously, we'll talk about Duke a little bit later, but one more regular season game coming up with the win over Notre Dame. Carolina did at least clinch a share of that ACC regular season title. First time since 2019 that Carolina's done that. So really, really big accomplishment, not only for Hubert Davis and the program as a whole. We'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. But when you're looking at this team, AJ, one of the big thing that stood out last night, I thought Carolina looked really well defensively. And again, I know Notre Dame's a team that young and I think is headed in the right direction, but it has not been a great year for them, no matter how you look at it. When you look at that overall record, they've struggled a lot this year. But for me, what stood out was Carolina defensively. And when Carolina's locked in, like we've seen them at times defensively this season, maybe we haven't seen it as much over the last couple of weeks, but when they are, for me, they go from a team that's maybe right here at this level to a team that's right here at this level. I think they just look so much better. But the fact of the matter is Carolina's now won 5 straight. They're playing at a pretty high level in a lot of different elements, defensively, offensively through RJ and some other guys over there. And it just feels like the team right now is headed in a positive direction going into the postseason. So what do you make of where Carolina is at right now? Because let's not rewrite history. We've had some conversations over the past week or a couple weeks or month where maybe we've been a little bit more critical about it because maybe the wins were there, but the performances weren't there. How do you feel about Carolina and where they're headed into the postseason right now?
Well, I reevaluated some of that thinking during the NC State game Saturday because it dawned on me, if you will, that okay, this is kind of who they are, and who they are isn't the same thing every night. It's different stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's ridiculous to make a referendum on them on one game because the next time they play, they could look totally different and still win. The fact that they can win games in the 50s, win games in the 90s, the fact that they can win games when they don't shoot well, they can win games when they give up a lot of 3-pointers, they can win games when RJ goes for 42, and they can win games sometimes where he scores 14 and hits 1 field goal in Charlottesville. There are so many different ways this team has proven it can win games that there are going to be nights where they don't look great and where Twitter's going to be on fire and people are going to be critical, like, what is wrong with the guys tonight kind of stuff. And yet they still come out with a win, which is ultimately the only thing that matters. Mm-hmm. So I think what we've seen the last month, even with some of the bad things, the losses, is that this is a really good team that just knows how to win. And sometimes they're going to do it where it's not very pretty. And sometimes they're going to do it where they look breathtaking like last night. So let's go back to the 10-game win streak. Since the 10-game win streak ended, they've lost 3 times. It ended in Georgia Tech and Atlanta by a loss by 1 point. RJ could have drawn a foul if it was called at the end. They could have won the game. The next loss was the hangover game against Clemson, who's really good. At home, Clemson opened up a 17-2 lead to start the game. Carolina tied it at 70 and then fizzled. And then the other loss was at Syracuse, a second-tier historic program in college basketball who had its best shooting night in half a century. And Carolina still was down 4 with the ball with 2 minutes left. That's it. Otherwise, they've won. And I think that tells you that this is a really good team. This is a team that can scratch, scrap, claw its way to being in position to win, regardless of what the shooting numbers look like, regardless of what some poor defensive stretches look like, regardless of foul trouble, regardless of who's hot and who's cold that night. They just find ways to be in the game and usually find ways to win. Now, there are some weaknesses. There are some questions for sure. Everyone's got that. And they might have a couple more than Purdue, a couple more maybe than UConn, a couple more maybe than Houston, but maybe not. I think maybe only UConn is a team that I would trust more going in the tournament. And the reason I would trust North Carolina tremendously is because they simply know how to win.
Yeah.
That's the greatest attribute you can have, is knowing how to win. And if you look at the last 3 weeks, go back to really, if you want to go back to the Duke game, every starter has had 2 massive flare-up games at minimum. 2. That's big time, because you're going to need that if you're going to win 6 in a row. You're going to need different guys to flare up sometimes, because it's not always going to be – RJ's not always going to be on. He's not always going to be wearing the pink shoes where he goes off when he wears the pink shoes, right? And the other thing that I think speaks volumes about this team, I'm going to do 1A and 1B. 1A is that since the Oklahoma game, they have out-rebounded every opponent. They have out-rebounded their last 19 opponents by a total of 174 rebounds. The other thing is, in the last 4 games, you go to Charlottesville, Virginia had a stretch where it was 1 for 23 from the floor. Saturday, NC State missed 15 straight. Last night, 11 straight misses. Carolina had a 19-0 run last night, and they had an 18-0 run in the same game. They also had an 8-0 spurt. So they know how to dominate sequences. They lock down defensively when they have to. If you think about the second half against O'Meara and Pack in Coral Gables, you think about the second half Saturday against Jaden Taylor and DJ Horn for State, you think about locking up Marcus Burton Tuesday night, the way that they did. Burton had his first single-digit scoring game since December 2nd. So he also, they limited his shots. He scored 9 points, limited his shots. He took 11 shots. He averages about 16 a game. That's significant. So they just know how to check certain boxes that must be checked that night to get a win. They're often different boxes, but they know how to check those. And that's what championship teams do. And Jacob, if they win Saturday, they're outright regular season champions. When was the last time they were outright regular season champions? 2017. What'd they do? They won the national title.
Great point.
Before that, the previous time they won the ACC regular season title was 2016. They lost the national championship game at the buzzer. Before that, it was 2012. If Kendall Marshall, that team got to the Elite Eight with Stillman White at point guard.
Really good team.
If Kendall Marshall doesn't get hurt, that club's on a collision course with Kentucky and for the national championship, maybe wins it all. Before that, it was 2009. They won the national championship. You get my drift?
Oh, totally. I know where you're coming from. Yeah.
There is something very, very significant about outlasting everybody else in that conference and winning the title. And certainly with North Carolina's history, that playing in Charlotte or opening up in the state for the NCAA tournament. There's so many stars that are aligned right now for something very significant to happen for this team. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just telling you that if you were to look at a giant platter, a March platter, they have as much on their platter as any other team in the country. And their platter is full moving forward, where some teams like, oh man, where'd that go? What happened to that? If you're Kansas, your platter has like 6 things on it now.
Yeah.
Whereas 5 weeks ago, maybe it was a full platter. Carolina's is still full. They went through a tough period. I think they've climbed out of it, and they have a full platter.
Yeah. It's been impressive to see. And again, like I said, they're a good team regardless. And offensively, they got so many guys that can give you different things on any given night, which we've talked about a lot this season. But as I've said, I know it's a cliche thing, defense wins championships, but AJ, when this team is locked in defensively, like we've seen at times this year, man, to me, like I said, it just takes them up another notch. And I think that is the thing going into the postseason is, can they put consistent games together when that defense is there? Again, I think we know what they can do offensively, and they have so many different guys that can give you something, not to mention ACC player of the year, future ACC player of the year, RJ Davis, who can, give you 40 on a given night if he wants to. But defensively, if they can keep that consistent effort and execution on that side of the ball, I think if we start seeing that, especially early on in the tournament, and it carries and carries and carries, we who knows what we could be talking about when April rolls around. But that's where it starts for me in particular. That's the next step for this team, is consistently doing that in these big games that they're going to be playing over the next month or so.
If you were to ask every Division I coach in college basketball right now, what are the two most important stats that for your team to lead your conference in? If you can say, okay, we're going to lead in two things before the season, what would they be? They would all say defense and rebounding.
Yep.
Who leads the ACC in defense and rebounding? North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing too is in the Ken Palm era that started, I think, in 2001 or 2002. All but 3 national champions were among the top 31 in adjusted defensive efficiency. North Carolina's way up there in that. They're in that. The 3 were, by the way, 09 Carolina, because they didn't have to defend, right? I mean, they paced themselves, but they were awesome defensively once they got to the postseason. 2015 Duke, which was a very young team, had some older guys, but they relied so much on youth, and they were breathtaking offensively. And then the Baylor team in the COVID year. Mm-hmm. And again, they had 58 guys that could score. So, when they weren't bad defensively, especially in the tournament. So that's it. Carolina's in that position. And oh, by the way, they have a go-to guy who can create his own shot. If you look at the top teams around the country, even with Houston, its best player is a guard, but he may not be able to create his own shot like RJ, and he's only a 13-point guy. Yeah. I think Tristan Newton for Connecticut can create his own shot. But he's a wing guy. He gets on the ball some. But I think RJ, with that step back and the ability to get in the lane and that off 1 foot floater that he has now, his toughness to get stuff off the glass when he's getting clobbered and getting the and ones. I think he's a guy that could score when you need a bucket as well as anybody in the country, because he doesn't have to worry about somebody getting him the ball. Zach Edey needs someone to get him the ball. Mm-hmm. Illinois sells out to double on Edey, and Purdue hits 58% from 3, and they win that game. They're not going to hit 58% from 3 all the time. Purdue goes out, someone's going to double Edey, they're going to miss threes, and that's the end. Carolina's in a little bit different situation because their go-to guy can create all of his own shots. Mm-hmm. He's a wizard out there at times. There's somebody actually said, and understand where I'm going with this. This is not my comparison. I thought it was interesting. Somebody said, it's almost Steph Curry like when Steph was in college. Mm-hmm. I covered Steph Curry's coming out party when they beat Georgetown in the NCAA tournament in 2007. Mm-hmm. And he was just creating his own shot all over the damn place. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying RJ Steph, but I'm saying that as a college player, there are some similarities there as far as being able to create his own shot, and there's not a damn thing a lot of defenders can do about it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm not saying he's going to go on and be that. Please understand. No, I know you're not. I'm just trying to draw a visual and an understanding that if your go-to guy is on the ball a lot, knows how to create his own shot, man, that is a massive extra that you have that a lot of other teams don't have. And they have that.
Absolutely. No, he's been fantastic. I was talking to somebody about him. I can't remember, maybe a couple of days ago, or maybe it was last night. I don't remember, but he's just been so good this year, man. And again, last night was kind of the exclamation point on it again, is he just does stuff and you're just like, man, I haven't seen a Carolina player like that in quite a few years, in terms of, a guy who can run the point, but who's kind of playing as a shooting guard, more of an off the ball guy this year. But like you said, he was creating his own shots. Like, he doesn't really, at times it's like, I'll just do this by myself and I'll go hit this step back 3 in front of somebody's face. And it almost looks effortless at times too. And that to me shows a guy that's playing with a lot of confidence in what he's doing, where he believes every shot he throws up is going in. So if he continues this level of play, what a great, I call him a security blanket, because we've talked about it a lot of, he can give you 30 on a night. That's not necessarily a recipe for success for this Carolina team long-term, but you have that option there. And you got Harrison Ingram. And you got Cormac Ryan. And you got a 5th-year guy in Armando Bacot. Elliot Cadeau too. Seth Trimble coming off the bench. Like, there's a lot of different options that this team has, but it starts with RJ Davis. He's been the guy this year, future ACC player of the year. I mean, if he doesn't win that, then I don't really know what to tell anybody.
They're adding as well right now. David Sisk loves a lot of the stuff that Hubert calls. Hubert is implemented some NBA stuff in what they do, like the actions that they run. they're starting to run a curl for him.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
He got a catch and shoot off a curl 15-foot jumper Tuesday night. That was a thing of beauty. And I'm going back a ways here, and it seems like yesterday for me, but the Maryland team that won the title back when Maryland was in the ACC, when they had Juan Dixon in 2002, Juan Dixon coming off the curl was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in the ACC. Mm-hmm. Not that they're going to run 1,000 of those for RJ, but the fact that it's there. And they can't get him looks, and not just from the wing. They can find ways to get him open because he can score from anywhere on the floor. And they've run some curls in the last couple of games for him. And last night it was perfect. Mm-hmm. It was perfect. So that's just another thing. And that way it's telling me if teams bottle him up a little bit, they're going to find ways to get him shots. They're not just going to rely on RJ creating his own stuff or getting a quick release jumper on a swing pass. They're going to find ways to get him looks. And they don't have to get him looks from the perimeter because he can score from anywhere. And I think that that's another little thing that's on that platter I was talking about. It's like they had to move a biscuit over to make room on the platter for that little curl for RJ they're going to use every once in a while. So add that to the mix.
It's a great observation. No, you're absolutely right. And again, if you don't watch David Siss film reviews, I don't really know what you're doing. If you're a Carolina basketball fan, go check those out. I'm sure they'll be more in the postseason, I'm sure, because he's an absolute rock star when it comes to those. But AJ, real quickly, I want to give a shout out before we move on to our second sponsor on this show. That's rogueshop.com. You guys know, if you've been with us, you know exactly who they are and what they're about. But rogueshop.com, check them out. They specialize in top shelf family grown hemp products, CBD, Delta 8, Delta 9, THCA. There's so many different types nowadays and so many different forms you can get in at rogueshop.com. Tinctures, oils, gummies, candies, flour, whatever you want and whatever you are looking for. Creams as well, which you talk about all the time. They've got you covered. Use the promo code TARHEELS10 when you order on their website to save on your next order. But get involved. It's high quality stuff. Again, it's family grown. You know where it's coming from. You know what's in it. You know what you're getting, which is a extremely high quality product that has a lot of TLC put into it as well. So check them out. Rogueshop.com. Again, use that promo code TARHEELS10 to save. Big thank you to Rogue Shop for sponsoring this show. AJ, real quickly before we move on to the Duke game a little bit, let's talk about what the Heels could win. Obviously, secured that ACC first place regular season, at least a co-share of that, depending on what happens against Duke. Even if a loss against Duke, they're still going to, be ACC champions. They'll just have to share it with the Blue Devils. But a win over Duke on Saturday night would outright give them that ACC championship, like we talked about a little bit earlier. Two other things they could win. We talked about RJ Davis. Think he's a shoe-in for the ACC Player of the Year right now, but I want to talk to you about ACC Coach of the Year and Hubert Davis, because I think when you look at what he's done this season, for me, he's got to be the front runner. Again, at least a share of the regular season ACC title, completely flipped his roster in the offseason, which I think he deserves a ton of credit for with rebuilding and bringing in the pieces that he has. I think it's been a really, really obviously successful roster reshape from him. Like we just talked about, led UNC to first at least share of the ACC titles, first time since 2019. That's an accomplishment. We've talked about it a second ago. One of the best defense in the league, also a really, really good offense, top 4 in the league right now. Rebounded from what was a very disappointing season last year, where there was a lot of question marks being asked, not only about Hubert, but the direction of this program. And again, rightly so when you look at the struggles that the program had last year. But he's done a great job of not only getting reshaping that roster, like I mentioned, but rebounding from what was just a really bad season last year from a Carolina perspective. And again, you got an ACC Player of the Year on your roster too, and RJ Davis, which I think he deserves credit for as well, because he's the head coach. So many different factors that could go into that voting. But when you look at it right now, AJ, it's just been a really good year for Carolina basketball that it could get a heck of a lot better depending on what happens over the next month.
I think Hubert should get some credit for unleashing RJ.
Yeah.
For knowing not to rush Elliott into the starting role, and then knowing when it was time to put Elliott in the starting role. And by the way, RJ started going off big time. Mm-hmm. He was going off a little bit before then, but Elliott was also playing a lot. So Hubert gets credit for all that stuff. RJ gets a ton of credit too, but Hubert gets credit for that as well. We were talking about this in the press room Tuesday night, long after the game. It was probably around 1:30 at this point, and there were still some of us in there. And who would be the other candidates? I think Red Autry at Syracuse has done a really nice job because he's not only had to take over from a guy who was there for 47 years, a legend, but he's changed the way they play the game. And he did it with still quite a few of the same kids on the roster. And he's had to do it going through some real rough patches and come out okay. And I think Syracuse is a dangerous team in DC, big time. In fact, if Carolina or Duke don't win it, I think it's going to be Syracuse or Pitt that do. Maybe
I can agree with that.
I think Syracuse and Pitt are NCAA tournament teams. They need to be in the field, and they can win some games. They really can. Who else might be in contention for it?
It's not a super long list, really.
It's not. I mean, there's some guy I like what Shrewsbury's doing at Notre Dame. I really do. I like what he's doing. I think Stoudemire, if he stays at Georgia Tech, he's going to do some really good things there. I think he's a really good fit there. And they've had some nice flare-ups. Shame on Wake. Seriously. The court storming was the karma that comes back to bite you in the derriere now.
Yeah, it's tough.
And when you proclaim too much after a win, it's the wrong approach. I've told the Seth Greenberg story a million times, and I'll tell it again right here since I'm sidebarring right now. I'll never forget back when the media could sit courtside at Virginia Tech. When I was with Fox Sports, I'm covering Duke, number one Duke at Virginia Tech on a Saturday night. And Virginia Tech gets the win, and they were on the bubble because Seth's teams were perpetually on the bubble at Virginia Tech. And after the game, he's jumping up and down, doing the celebration thing, hugging his wife and daughters, pumping his fist, we're in, that kind of thing. But season wasn't over yet. They had a makeup game 2 nights later at home against Boston College. It was a makeup game because it had been snowed out like a month earlier. BC came in there and beat the living crap out of them. That, to me, was the Seth Greenberg era at Virginia Tech, right? And I'm not being critical, Seth. It's just an observation, and it's pretty spot on. I think that Steve Forbes and Wake Forest had their Seth Greenberg Virginia Tech moment here in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Shame on them. Shame on them. They don't deserve it.
Got a lot of talent on that roster, but just
they are who they are. They are who they've been under Forbes, and until he can get them over this hump that is growing each year, I think questions will rightfully be raised. Now, so we're talking about Coach of the Year. He may have been a guy that was in the running 2 weeks ago. He's not now. I think Brad Brownell's done a really good job. They've lost some games they should have lost, though. My one question about Clemson is I don't know if the point guard play is good enough to get them to Phoenix. I think that they've got some Phoenix-type stuff on that roster because we've seen teams get to Phoenix, get to the Final Four in the last 10 years that Clemson's better than.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't give him the award. So who else would it be? I think Shire's doing a nice job with all the injuries.
I was going to say, yeah, maybe him, but Hubert deserves it more than
it's not Larinaga. It's not Hamilton. It's obviously not Kenny Payne, who'll be out of a job in I don't know how many hours.
Kevin Keats, no way.
Yeah, it's not Keats. No, I mean Keats might be out of work too. It's not Tony Bennett. It's not Mike Young. It's not Earl Grant. So I think it's Hubert Davis. I would be shocked if it's not Hubert Davis.
I don't know how it wouldn't be. Yeah. Like I said, when you just look at what Carolina's done this year and the changes he's made, and we talked about Hubert growing as a coach, it was always going to happen. It was a guy who had, besides coaching the JV team at UNC, didn't have head coaching experience really before he took over at North Carolina. So there was always going to be a learning curve. And I think when the first season goes like it does towards the end, expectations change, and last year's team, for whatever reason, just didn't handle those expectations very well. And coaching wasn't great at times. Like we spent, a ton of time talking about last season. But again, when you look at what's transpired this year and where Carolina's finished and what they've become and are right now, it's got to be Hubert Davis. I mean, I don't know who else you could give it to, especially like we just ran through. I mean, it doesn't make sense to anybody else.
And he needs to just let them play Tuesday night, let them play. Don't sometimes back off and let them play. That's the best coaching you could do, is by not overcoaching. And he's learning all that because he's still in year 3. And we did say all along, everyone wanted to make full judgment on him after year 1, after year 2, et cetera. it takes 3 years, in my opinion, to really get a feel for a guy who can coach. I think Hubert can coach. I think Hubert, for all that he brings to that position as a human being, for the type of program he wants to run, for the way communication occurs within the program, I think we've seen guys individually improve under his watch. I think the keeping it in the family, because it's so important to North Carolina. I've said all along that if Hubert Davis can be the next guy to take the torch and carry it for a long time, it would be the best thing for this program, because it keeps, the axis of the earth where it needs to be with Carolina basketball. And Hubert brings all those qualities. So the one thing he has had to learn how to do and still has to learn how to do is become a great coach. He has made tremendous strides in that area this year. There's no doubt about it. So he's going to be back, and he's going to be back for a while. So we'll get to see how much he grows in year 4 and year 5. And Roy Williams will tell you he was a better coach in year 5 than he was in year 1 at Kansas. Dean will tell you the same thing if he could, but he would have told you that 20 years ago. Bobby Knight, all of them, Calipari, Izzo, all those guys. You get better and better and better, especially when you care. I'm a better journalist now than I was 15 years ago because I care. You're better at what you do now than you were when you first got to THI because you care. And Hubert cares. So to me, he's the runaway ACC Coach of the Year. RJ's the runaway ACC Player of the Year. And I think we saw the ACC Freshman of the Year Tuesday night in the Dean Dome, and Carolina locked them up.
Yeah,
but I think Marcus Burton's a freshman, should be the Freshman of the Year.
Agreed. And hopefully he does win that because he's been really good for Notre Dame this season. But yeah, couldn't agree more with that, Edge. A lot of accolades coming Carolina's way, and they could, like I said, lock up a outright ACC championship against Duke on Saturday night. Let's talk about that matchup. I know we're gonna do a drop. You'll probably do some drops about the Duke game and some different aspects of it, but massive game on Saturday night in Cameron. It always is when Carolina and Duke meet, but even for a bigger reason with the ACC outright championship kind of being on the line. A win would secure it for North Carolina, and a win for Duke would mean that they, share it. So, still a really good season for North Carolina, regardless of what happens on Saturday evening. But just real quickly, thoughts on that matchup and, some of you're looking forward to that one. I'm assuming it's always fun when Carolina goes to Cameron, right?
Absolutely. Of course. It's one of the rewards for leaving press rooms at 5 o'clock in the morning. You get to cover stuff like this. So I'll tell you, every year, the first Carolina Duke game, excuse me, I'm going to have some water here. The first Carolina Duke game is always the most anticipated because we go so long waiting for them to play.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%. So much anticipation for that game. Yeah.
Pardon me. I usually don't drink water on these shows, but I had to that time. But every once in a while, the second one carries tremendous meaning. And this one carries tremendous meaning. And I've always liked the game a little bit more over Duke because I like the uniform combination. And please, Duke, don't wear the Brotherhood unis.
Yeah, please.
Wear your regular uniforms. Duke's regular uniforms on the court with Carolina's regular uniforms gives me goosebumps.
It's great.
That is the quintessential laundry game. I love laundry games in college basketball. Carolina versus Kentucky, Carolina versus UCLA, Kentucky versus Kansas. I love laundry games, and this is a great laundry game. So I hope they wear their regular uniforms. But this one carries tremendous importance. And I'll be honest with you, man, there were people in the media that didn't think Duke would be in this position. There were people that covered Duke that thought, you know what, this club's just missing some stuff. Shire's got them playing well. And by incorporating Sean Stewart more into things of late, he gives them some bounce that maybe they didn't have. He's even playing TJ Power some. Duke still has some question marks. Don't really protect the rim that great. Filipowski, I think people constantly expect more from him. It's probably not fair, but they do, and sometimes he needs to give them more. They have to shoot the three well, not just McCain. Roach has to be on for them to win a game like this. So, but I think Shire's done a really nice job because they're constantly injured. Foster's out right now. So he's done a good job. And I think it's good for North Carolina that Shire's doing a good job. Yeah. Duke's really good. And I think it's good for Duke that Hubert's doing a good job and Carolina's really good because I've talked to both Mike Krzyzewski and Roy Williams about this in the past, that they kind of help. They're good for each other. They prop each other up.
Of course,
Coach K never shied away about it. He always, look, we help each other.
Mm-hmm.
We prop each other up. If they're the two best programs in college basketball over a certain period of time, and they're constantly competing with one another, one-upping each other, kind of like, rival siblings in some way, where the brother got the bigger piece of pizza, so the next time you're going to get it. There's an element to that here. And I think it's good for both of them. And my favorite line from Coach K in those years that I covered them as well, he used to say one of the reasons these two schools, these two programs excel so often in the NCAA tournament, by the time they get to the postseason, they've already played 2 Final Four games. Because when these two teams play, it's like a Final Four game. These are games that are kind of separate from the season, especially the first one. It's like a sidebar to the season. And we saw that with Carolina. Now it's everything. It's the spectacle. It's game day. It's this heated rivalry. It could be a 500 Carolina team and a rolling Duke team. It doesn't matter. Other way around. Doesn't matter. It's such an intense, different human nature experience on the court for these guys when they play each other. But now they got an ACC regular season title on the line.
Juicy.
Now these are two teams that, especially the way Duke's come on, you have to look at Duke as a legitimate Final Four national championship contender. Mm-hmm. These are two clubs. If you were to pull out 8 teams across the country that can win the title, if the tournament started an hour from now, I think these two would be on that list. So there's so much on the line here. And then Charlotte's on the line. If Carolina wins this game, they're going to start out in Charlotte, no matter what happens in DC. If Duke wins and then goes further in DC, Carolina's in danger of not starting out in Charlotte, because you got to think Tennessee's probably going to be in Charlotte.
That's a good point. So
then the loser, whoever finishes second among these two here in the next week, could end up like in Detroit.
Yeah,
who the hell wants to go to Detroit?
I don't need that. I know you don't want to.
Nobody wants to go to Detroit. No, I have no interest in going to Detroit. If they were to rebuild the old Tiger Stadium and let me go see a baseball game there, I'd be cool.
Yeah,
about 3.5. I'd be cool being in Detroit for about 3.5 hours, and then I want out.
In and out.
Yeah, I'll go across the river in Ontario, or in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. So, and go gambling with Ty Lawson.
Yeah.
Anybody who knows the Ty Lawson Detroit gambling stories after the title in 2009 knows exactly what I'm talking about. But I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a great game. And there's going to be somebody, and I want to ask you a question. There's going to be somebody from both teams that steps up and does something above norm in this game, especially for the winning team. So I'm going to throw the question to you, and I want our listeners to give their projections. You could do both teams if you want. If you don't have the appetite to do a Duke players or type of Duke player's name, I get it. Duke fans probably don't have an appetite to type of North Carolina player's name, I get it. But who'd that player be? I think it's Seth Trimble.
That's where my mind went.
This game's going to have a pace. There's going to be some recklessness at times to this game, and I think that plays right into Trimble's hands. And it's very possible he gets a lot of time, because with a lot of driving, sometimes guards foul. So maybe an RJ or an Elliott getting some foul trouble, and Hubert has to sit him for a while, and Seth's out there. And I think this game might play into his hands. My prediction would be Seth Trimble plays above norm for North Carolina in this game. If I'm going to throw somebody out at Duke, I'm going to go with Sean Stewart, just because he's been out of norm for the last couple of weeks, and there's no reason to expect that that'll change. And he's the one guy that's kind of different from what they were before. But I will also say this, as I'm rambling on forever again. I think Carolina creates more problems for Duke than Duke does for Carolina, just strictly on paper.
Agreed.
I think they're a better team, and I think they're built to win these games a little bit more. But I mean, Duke could win, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
In fact, I may even predict Duke to win.
Yeah, it's just, we've talked about it. It's hard to beat Duke twice in a season. It's hard for Duke to beat Carolina a season when both teams are this good. We've seen in the past when, maybe one team's down and vice versa. And it's a little bit easier for, Duke or Carolina to sweep the regular season series against them. But no, I agree. I'm a little bit on the fence about what happens in this game, but I do think Carolina on paper, like we saw in Chapel Hill, is a better basketball team than Duke is. To answer your question, I'm going to go with Sean Stewart on Duke. I think that's where my mind went immediately with him because of, like you said, because of what his play's been of late.
Yeah.
And I'm no Duke expert when it comes to the bench of what they got, but Stewart to me seems like the most likely option over there. Trimble's where my head went on Carolina. But just to be a little bit different, my second thought was Jalen Withers. We've seen Armando get in foul trouble this year a little bit, particularly against talented bigs. Does that maybe happen in Durham early on? Maybe he gets too early fouls, and is forced to sit late in the first half. Maybe a Jalen Withers comes in because of his athleticism, because of his ability to hit different kinds of shots and just be a nuisance kind of around the rim. Maybe he comes in and provides a little bit of a spark off the bench for the Tar Heels. I think if I was to, I'm not obviously not betting on this. If I was to bet on a guy, I'd probably lean more towards Tribble, but just to be a little bit different with it, I'll throw Jalen Withers in there as well. Heck, maybe Jalen Washington steps out there and hits a couple more threes. Who the heck knows, right?
I think Jalen Withers is a great pick. And let's remember that Jalen Withers has played in that building before. So has Cormac Ryan. Cormac won in that building. Yeah. Notre Dame beat Duke there a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. So I think this Carolina team is going to be unfazed by it. And this is going to be one last sort of, okay, let's find out what they're really and truly made of. Let's put a bow on that going into the postseason, because there is not going to be any situation that they're going to play in that is going to be more challenging to be focused and be on the same page than this game, in my opinion, because it is this game. But also, so much is on the line. They're playing for a championship. So it goes back to what Coach K said. They're playing for a championship. Yeah. If Carolina wins this game, they are the outright champions of the ACC, and it's very important to this group. Armando has said all along, want to hang banners, man. Want to hang banners. They want to hang three. Now, I think this is the second most important of the three they want to hang. The first being obviously the national championship, the third being the ACC tournament championship. But this one right here, I don't think the national championship could happen for this team without at least having a share of the ACC championship. Mm-hmm. I think they needed to get to this rock in order to cross that stream. Mm-hmm. And they're there now. And if they win it outright, they take a leap into the middle of the stream on another rock. They're that much closer to crossing to the other side. I think that this group needed that. I think the head coach needed it. I think the fan base needed it. To view this team as a legitimate North Carolina contending type team. I think that's been coming into form with a lot of fans, but I still think some are kind of iffy about that. And they have a chance to throw an exclamation mark down on that Saturday night.
It's going to be a fun one, man. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to being in the building for that one. And I'm really excited to be back there. And, it's always a great time. It's my second game covering there. I've only been there twice, once before this, which was the Cole Anthony year when Carolina just wasn't even really a game, to be honest with you. That was an unfortunate one from a Carolina perspective. But this one, for so many different reasons. Yeah, the Cole Anthony. That was the only time I've covered a few, obviously. I thought
you'd been in since then.
Nope, that was the only game at Cameron that I've been to. I was baseline doing photos for that one. So it was a really an experience I'll never forget. Okay. I've got some pictures with the Cameron Crazies, and then it was a cool, an awesome experience. So I'm looking forward to being back in there for.
Well, you're shooting Saturday night because Kevin can't, so we're moving you from press row to the baseline.
Happy to do it, man. I like taking photos, so you never hear me complain about sitting courtside at a Carolina Duke game in Cameron. I mean, you never hear me complain about that. Sounds like a pretty damn good way to spend your Saturday night. So we'll see what happens. We'll be there. TarHeelIllustrated.com. Keep it locked. Links in the description below. With another edition of the UNC Basketball Show. We appreciate everybody watching. As always, big thank you to MyPerfectFranchise.net. Big thank you to RogueShop.com. Links in the description for those two awesome organizations. Make sure you use that promo code TarHeels10 at Rogue Shop, and make sure you, if you do end up talking to Andy at My Perfect Franchise, make sure you tell him that TarHeelIllustrated.com sent you. And AJ, last plug I'm throwing, $8.33 a month, TarHeelIllustrated.com. Sign up, guys. Sign up. Even if you just want to look at it as a way to support what we do on the YouTube side, it's a great way to do that. But you also get a ton of extra content, a ton of extra perks, access to our premium message boards, access to articles you can only get access to if you are a premium subscriber. So a ton of perks that come along with that. But again, just $8.33 a month. And AJ, you haven't changed that price in nine and a half years?
No, I took over the site August 1st, 2014. It's the same price right now.
Almost 10 years.
We used to joke. Well, it's like the price of 3 candy bars, or it's the price of like a drive-through order meal and adding a large fry or something like that.
Cheaper.
Yeah, it's cheaper than a number in a drive-through.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I mean, it's
cheaper than a number in a drive-through. It's unbelievable.
It's like you can't even get you couldn't even buy me and AJ a cup of coffee at Starbucks for $8.33.
Here's perspective for you. My daughter loves Lunchables.
Oh yeah, me too. Big Lunchables. All right. Fan.
So the other day I'm at Harris Teeter looking at Lunchables, and they're $5.99 a pop.
Hey, $5.99 now. Oh.
Yeah, if you stack the food up together, it's like this.
God,
right?
$5.99 for a Lunchable now.
$5.99 for a freaking Lunchables. We're $8.33, and we've been $8.33 for almost 10 years.
God.
It's a drop in the bucket.
Can't believe
you get a ton for it.
So much. And again, I always say this. The more money we make as a site, the more content we can put out, and the more content we will put out. We're not just going to put that money in our pockets and rest on our laurels. We're always trying to try new things and do new things and do more stuff. So again, the more money we make, not only the more not even the more perks you get on the website, but the more stuff we'll do on YouTube and the more great content you'll get over here as well. So yeah, go ahead and sign up. Links in the description below. Great time to do so. It's always a good time to be a Carolina insider, and you can do that with TarHeelIllustrated.com. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another edition of the UNC Basketball Show. Like the video. Let's do this. I always like to end it like this. Like the video below if you think Carolina beats Duke on Saturday. This better I need at least 100 likes. AJ, I don't know if I told you. I always challenge when we do 3 things. I want a certain amount of likes. I asked for 250 after the state game. Last time I checked, we were over 300. So the people are listening. They are doing what we're asking. Let's see if we can get 100 likes on this one. That's what I'm looking for on this one, 100 likes. And if you think Carolina's going to win, go ahead and hit that like button below. Share, subscribe, hit the notification bell too. We'll see y'all next time. Thanks.